Elijah Cutter was a man who lived with silence the way others lived with family. Familiar, constant, and never questioned. After his wife died and the land took his only son with a broken neck beneath a bronco, the world seemed to shrink to the size of his ranch near Dead Horse Ridge, far from any road men traveled willingly. He worked the land with quiet hands and steady sweat, fixing fences, riding the same weather-beaten gelding, boiling coffee in the same battered tin pot he'd owned since the war. He'd ridden with the Texas Rangers in his youth, traded bullets with Comanche raiding parties, seen enough death to hollow a man out. But now, Elijah simply wanted the land to leave him alone, and in turn, he left the world to its own wildness. Until that morning when the wind shifted strange and Bristle, his old blue heeler, barked in a way Elijah hadn't heard since the dog was young and the world still dangerous. It was near the North Ridge, where cottonwoods twisted like ghosts and the stream ran shallow through a bed of broken rock. Elijah found the girl half buried in juniper brush, curled on her side like a wounded animal. Her dress, or what was left of it, was torn and crusted with blood, and her long black hair was matted with sweat, dirt, and dried leaves. Her skin, a deep sun-warmed brown, was slick with fever, and a bullet wound leaked dark blood near her ribs. Elijah didn't speak. He just knelt down, fingers finding the pulse on her neck, faint, fluttering like the wing of a dying sparrow. She wasn't more than 16, 17 at most. One eye cracked open. She saw him and flinched, weakly muttering words in Comanche. Elijah looked around, saw no tracks but hers, no pursuers, no salvation. He picked her up in his arms, lighter than a sack of oats, and carried her back toward his cabin as the dog padded alongside in tense silence. Back at the cabin, he cleared the workbench and laid her down gently, cleaning the wound with boiled water and rough cotton. Her breathing was shallow, but steadying. The bullet had gone clean through, but it hadn't been dressed properly. Someone had tried, poorly, to stop the bleeding. Elijah recognized the frayed bandages, a hunter's kit, not a healer's. He muttered a curse under his breath, gritted his teeth, and set to work. There were no doctors out here, no help, just calloused hands and old knowledge scraped from the battlefield. He stitched her wound with thick thread and trembling care, packed it with sage poultice and pine sap, then covered her with a wool blanket. He didn't sleep that night. He sat beside her with a rifle across his lap and memories stirring in the corners of his mind like restless spirits. The girl didn't speak for 2 days. She woke only to sip water or slip into uneasy dreams. Elijah kept to routine, mending tack, feeding the animals, chopping firewood, but always with one ear tuned to the creak of the floorboards where she lay resting. On the third morning, she sat up groggily, her hand pressed to her bandaged side, and spoke in halting English. "Where am I?" she asked. Elijah, who was cutting apples at the table, looked up. "My land, near Dead Horse Ridge. You were dying under the trees. I brought you here." She stared at him for a long moment, distrust etched deep in her face. "Why?" she asked. He paused, wiped the knife clean, and shrugged. "Didn't see a Comanche girl. Just saw someone bleeding. Her name was Tiva." Her words were scattered, her voice raspy, but she told enough. She had been traveling with her uncle and 2 others, moving south from the Llano Estacado to rejoin family near the Brazos. They had camped near the Pecos when white hunters came on them in the night, drunk, wild, looking for trouble. They killed her uncle. One of the others was dragged off. Tiva ran. They shot her, missed her heart, and she kept running until her legs gave out near the canyon. Elijah didn't ask more. He could picture the rest. Days passed. She healed slowly but steadily. Elijah made no demands. She slept in his bed while he took to the cot by the stove. They didn't talk much. She didn't smile, but she watched him work with quiet eyes, watched how he handled his horses, how he spoke to the dog like it was a brother, how he moved through the world without noise or rush. She was learning. On the 5th day, she stood outside with a bucket and gathered water from a spring. On the 6th, she helped wash the dishes. By the 7th, she was helping mend the fence. Elijah had questions in his gut about what would happen when someone came looking for her, about the cost of harboring a Comanche girl with wounds caused by white men, but he kept them down like bitter whiskey. He'd lived long enough to know right from wrong, and this girl hadn't done anything to deserve death or fear. If that meant trouble, so be it. She started asking him questions, too. What kind of rifle was that? Why had he named the dog Bristle? How many men had he killed? Elijah didn't lie. He told her about the Rangers, about the raids, about the regret he carried like a stone in his chest. Thought I was keeping the frontiers safe, he said. But mostly I just made widows and orphans. She nodded, not in forgiveness, but in understanding. Tension began to coil in the land like a rattlesnake under a log. Riders passed along distant ridges. Smoke curled where no camps should be. At the trading post, Elijah heard whispers. A settler's homestead burned. A white boy went missing near the Brazos. Reckon the Comanche are riled up, said old Blevins behind the counter. Something stirred him. Elijah bought coffee, flour, and bullets. On his way out, Blevins called after him. You ain't seen anything strange, have you? Elijah didn't answer. Tiva sensed a change, too. She spent less time outside, slept with the rifle near the bed. One evening, Elijah found her making a necklace from coyote teeth. For protection, she said softly. That night, she asked what would happen if her people found her here. Elijah leaned back in his chair, staring at the fire. I don't know. Depends if they come looking for peace or revenge. She met his eyes. If they come, I will speak for you. You saved me. Elijah nodded, but he knew how stories spread. In war, truth was the first to die. Then, on the 11th morning, everything changed. Bristle growled low in his throat as Elijah stepped out with a pail. The sun hadn't cleared the ridges yet, but the air felt charged. Elijah turned his head west and saw the dust cloud on the horizon, low, wide, and rising fast. Riders. Many. He ran to the ridge behind the barn, lifted the spyglass, and felt his stomach sink. 50, maybe more. Warriors. Bareback. Bows, rifles, feathers in their hair, faces painted with vengeance. Comanche. He rode back fast, heart pounding. Tiva was already outside, barefoot in the dust, staring into the wind like she'd felt the earth whisper their arrival. She held the rifle with both hands, but there was no fear in her eyes, just certainty. It is my people, she said, but I do not know if they come for me. Elijah loaded his rifle, checked the pistol at his hip, looked toward the horizon where the riders grew larger with every second. He stood beside the girl, the cabin behind them, the land silent but watching. Then we better be ready, he said. The days passed slowly, but not gently. Elijah Cutter wasn't used to anyone in his home, especially not a girl whose language danced between English and Comanche like a river switching beds. He patched her wounds with what salves he had, fed her on cornmeal, beans, and bits of jerky. She barely ate at first, her body still locked in survival mode. But by the third morning, she asked for water. By the fifth, she sat up. By the seventh, she asked if her horse had made it. Elijah just shook his head. Buzzards got to it first, he said, grim but honest. You're lucky they didn't get to you too. She told him her name was Tiva, not with pride, more like it was something she'd forgotten until now. Her voice cracked when she said it. Elijah didn't pry. He let her talk in pieces, like ash drifting from a dying fire. What he learned chilled him. White hunters, scouts working for a local cattle syndicate, had come through the hills, chasing rumors of Comanche activity. They'd come across her family, camped in a ravine. No warning, no law, just bullets. Her uncle had tried to run. Her cousin, too. They were shot in the back. She didn't remember being hit. Just running, then nothing. Elijah listened and stayed quiet. He'd once ridden with a U.S. regiment that did the same thing to another camp. He never told her that. By the second week, she could walk. Not far, not fast, but with the strength of someone who refused to lie down again. She took to the animals naturally. The Mustang, his last horse, didn't like anyone but Elijah, but it let her braid its mane. She talked to it softly in Comanche, a rhythm older than English, older than fences. Elijah would stand in the barn doorway and watch her sometimes, arms folded, eyes squinting against the low sun. He hadn't asked why he'd saved her. He still didn't know. Maybe he saw the same kind of quiet fire in her he'd once seen in his wife, now long buried beneath the cottonwood outback. Or maybe it was guilt. He didn't know. He only knew she belonged nowhere now. And neither did he. It was on the 18th day the dust appeared on the ridge. At first, it was just a haze, brown, low, steady. Elijah knew the earth well enough to tell the difference between wind and hooves. These were hooves. Many. He climbed to the roof with his spyglass. His blood went cold. 50 of them. Not cattlemen. Not soldiers. Comanche. Painted. Armed. Moving in formation. This wasn't a scout party. It was a war party. He slid down the side of the roof, slammed the barn doors shut, and loaded his Winchester. Tiva came stumbling out of the house, hair still wet from washing. "What is it?" she asked. He pointed toward the hills. "Riders. A lot of them. Your people." Her face went pale, not fear exactly, something more tangled. "If they think you took me," she said quietly, "they'll kill you." Elijah nodded. "I figured." They had only minutes. He unhitched the Mustang, handed her the reins. "Go. Head through the scrub canyon, the one with all the dead cedar. There's a trail beyond it. You might make it." She stared at the reins, then him. "You're staying? They'll ride faster if they see me. Give you time. I'm old, but I shoot straight. They'll kill you before you fire twice." He smiled grimly. "I never said it was a good plan." But she didn't take the reins. She threw them back. "No," she said. "I won't run again." Elijah opened his mouth, closed it. The wind picked up. The hooves were louder now. "You think I saved you to get you killed?" he snapped. "You didn't save me to die alone," she replied. "And I won't let you." He stared at her, and for the first time since she arrived, he saw her as more than a girl. She was a flame, and she would not be blown out, not by wind, men, or fear. They prepared the homestead like soldiers, reinforced the cabin shutters, moved water barrels inside, dug a trench behind the barn. Elijah positioned his old Sharps rifle atop the roofline, tied his ammo belt across his chest, and watched the warriors draw near. 50 strong. Their paint glistened in the sun, red streaks down their faces, black handprints over their hearts. They were not coming for diplomacy. Tiva climbed to the roof beside him. She held the carbine he'd given her with both hands, her knuckles white. "They'll recognize me," she said. "They'll know I'm alive." "Then what?" Elijah asked. "They call off the attack. Or kill you for laying hands on me," she said, voice flat. "Some will see you as a hero. Others won't care." And then they came. Not charging, but slow. Measured, like a tide rising. They fanned out across the dry ground, forming a semicircle 100 yards from the cabin. At their center rode a man on a black horse. He wore no shirt. His chest bore a scar from shoulder to hip, and his arms were thick as carved oak. He raised one hand. Elijah stood. "Who leads here?" the man called in near-perfect English. "I do," Elijah answered. "And who are you to stand between us and our blood?" "She ain't your blood to spill," Elijah said. "She's mine to protect." There was a murmur. Bows were raised. A few muskets aimed. Tiva stepped forward. "His name is Elijah Cutter," she said in Comanche, loudly. "He saved my life. I was dead. He brought me back. You would kill him for that." The man's eyes narrowed. "Tiva." Her chin lifted. "Yes." He looked shaken, uncertain. "We were told you were gone. Slain by white devils. We swore blood vengeance." "You swore for me," she said. "But I am alive. And this man did not hunt me. He fed me, healed me, risked his land for me." They argued among themselves. A younger warrior called her tainted. Another called her reborn. One old man said they should hear her out. Another spat and said Elijah was no different than the others. The leader dismounted, walked forward alone. Elijah met him halfway. They stood 10 feet apart. "You are not like the soldiers," the man said, "but you were the same skin." Elijah nodded. "I did worse than most of them. I've been on both ends of a rifle." "Why save her?" "Because no one else would." There was a long pause. Then the Comanche man turned. "She lives. That is the truth. Let there be no war here." A few argued, furious. But he raised his hand again. "You want war? Go fight the men who killed her kin, not the man who mended her bones." And just like that, the tide receded. They left with the same thunder they came with, hooves tearing the dirt behind them. but they left peace in their wake. Uneasy, fragile, but peace. That night, Tiva sat beside Elijah on the porch. She was trembling. They wouldn't have listened if I hadn't stood with you. Maybe, Elijah said, but you did, and that made all the difference. She looked up at the stars, voice low. You think they'll come back? Maybe, he said, but next time, it won't be for war. It'll be to see how strong you've become. She looked at him. You mean us? Elijah smiled. Yeah, us. The first rider broke from the pack like a hawk diving for a rabbit, his black stallion thundering down the ridge as the other warriors fanned out across the high ground. Elijah Cutter stood still, the butt of his rifle pressed against the dry earth, his weathered eyes tracking every hoofbeat with the calm of a man who had stood in 100 standoffs before. The girl, Tiva, did not flinch. She moved to stand half a step in front of him, not behind. She knew these warriors. She knew what the paint on their faces meant. Red and black, vengeance and mourning. She knew the man approaching too. His name was Juanado, her cousin, and the line of hard creases on his face told her everything. He thought she was dead, and he came ready to answer that death with more blood. Juanado rode close, so close Elijah could see the thin scar that ran from his temple to jaw. The stallion pawed the ground, steam curling from its nostrils. You, the warrior growled, eyes locked on Elijah, are the one who took her. Tiva raised a hand. He saved me, cousin. He found me after the white hunters left me for dead. He gave me food, medicine, safety. Juanado's nostrils flared. He spoke past her, never taking his gaze from the rancher. You expect me to believe a white man took a Comanche girl into his home for mercy? Elijah didn't speak. He didn't plead. He let the rifle hang loose at his side and said in a voice like gravel, didn't matter what she was. Just mattered she was bleeding. The other warriors approached slowly, circling like wolves, uneasy and ready for the smallest excuse to attack. Tiva turned, stepping fully between her people and the man who had healed her. I was dying. He brought me back. I owe him my life. One of the older warriors spit on the ground. What does that mean, child? You owe nothing to the ones who took our land and our blood. Another added, they kill us. And now you speak for one. Juanado raised his hand, silencing them. If you stand with him, Tiva, then speak your truth. She squared her shoulders, voice trembling only slightly. He is not like the men who killed Uncle. He is not like the soldiers or traitors. He has no tribe, no kin left, and no hate in him. He is broken, like many of us, but he is not cruel. A silence passed over the land. Even the horses stilled. Juanado dismounted, walked slowly forward. Elijah didn't raise his rifle, though his finger hovered near the trigger. The warrior stopped just a few feet away. Let me see the wound, he said. Tiva pulled up the side of her shirt, revealing the stitched flesh, the healing bruises. The warriors murmured among themselves. Clean work, one said. Not a butchering, another added. No white man I know would waste time sewing a Comanche girl shut. Juanado's face softened. He touched the edge of the bandage, nodded once, then turned to Elijah. You gave her shelter, he said, but this land is not safe. White men come and go. They talk with guns and take what they want. You will be hunted too now, for protecting her. Elijah gave a thin, bitter smile. Been hunted before. Juanado studied him for a long time. If you stay here, more will come. Soldiers, bounty riders. You cannot stand alone forever. Elijah nodded. Wasn't planning to. I figured I'd be dead by now. Tiva stepped closer. We can't leave him. They'll kill him. Juanado looked to his warriors. He gave us back one of our own. Do we repay that with his blood? The younger ones looked uncertain, but the elders muttered among themselves and nodded. Juanado turned back. We will leave your land in peace. But understand this. The world is changing. The white man's roads will eat the earth. If you want to survive, you must choose a side. Elijah met his gaze. I did. When I saved her, that night, they built a fire together. Not just Elijah and Tiva, but the Comanche warriors too. They brought venison, dried berries, and smoked fish. The tension hung in the air like the smoke, but slowly the mood softened. Stories were shared, of battles, of lost kin, of long winters and quiet grief. One warrior asked Elijah how many Comanche he had killed. Elijah didn't lie. "Too many," he said. "More than I'll ever be proud of." Another asked Tiva why she didn't run when she saw him. She replied, "Because he didn't look at me like a prize. He looked at me like a person." Juanato stayed late into the night, speaking with Elijah away from the others. "You know this doesn't end here," he said. "Those men who hurt her, they won't just disappear. They'll come for her again, or for you, or both. And if they learn she lived, they'll try to silence her." Elijah sipped from his tin cup. "Let him come. I've got bullets and a good aim left in me." Juanato grunted. "Bullets run out. What you need is a circle. People who stand with you." He gestured toward the girl. "You already have one. And maybe, for now, you have us too." Tiva's presence began to change the ranch in the days that followed. Where it had once been silent and filled with nothing but the sound of wind and hooves, now there was song. She sang while gathering herbs, while tending the horse with her long fingers, while weaving rope. Elijah found himself speaking more than he had in years, teaching her how to shoot properly, how to set traps, how to read the weather in the clouds. In return, she taught him to listen, not with ears but with patience. She pointed out the birds, the plants that healed, the signs of coyote trails. She gave him back something he hadn't known he'd lost: presence. But the storm Juanato warned of came like all storms do, sudden, ugly, and full of fury. It was a cold morning when Elijah saw dust on the road. Not Comanche this time, but riders wearing blue. Cavalry. 6 of them. A scout, a corporal, and 4 men who didn't ride like soldiers. They rode like hunters. Bounty men. Elijah stepped out with his rifle, calm, waiting. The corporal dismounted. "You cut her?" Elijah nodded. "Depends who's asking." The soldier glanced around the property. "We got word you might be harboring a runaway savage girl. Comanche. There's a reward for her return." Elijah's grip on the rifle tightened. "Ain't no runaway here. Just a girl healing for being shot by cowards." One of the bounty men sneered. "Ain't your business who shot her. She's Comanche. That makes her a threat." Tiva stepped out from the cabin behind him, rifle in hand. She stood tall, eyes sharp. "I am no threat to you," she said clearly. "But you are to me." The bounty men chuckled. "Look at that. Talking like she belongs here." The corporal raised his hand. "Stand down. She's under this man's protection. That makes this messy. We'll report back. You'll be hearing from a judge." They left without blood that day, but it was only a delay. Elijah and Tiva prepared for war, reinforced the cabin, dug a second trench. The Comanche returned in small numbers, scouts mostly, watching the roads, leaving signs only Tiva understood. One day, Juanato came again. He brought 10 warriors. "You saved one of ours," he said. "Now we repay the debt." When the men returned, it was with more firepower. 10 bounty hunters and 3 lawmen pretending not to see who really pulled the strings. They came before dawn, moving like jackals. But Elijah was ready. He lit the torches they'd hidden in the trenches. The Comanche moved like ghosts through the brush. Tiva fired from the loft window, her shot clean and sharp. The first wave fell before they reached the porch. It wasn't a war. It was a reckoning. When the dust settled, 5 bounty men were dead, 1 lawman wounded. The others rode off into the dark, humiliated and bleeding. Elijah lowered his rifle with shaking hands. Blood trickled from a cut above his brow. Tiva ran to him, clutching his arm. "It's done," she whispered. The next weeks passed quiet again. The law stayed away. Word spread. Some called Elijah a traitor. Others called him brave. The Comanche no longer rode just to repay a debt. They came as friends. Trade was made. Peace, tentative but real, was carved into the dry ground. One evening, Tiva sat beside him on the porch, the land spread wide before them. "You still want to be alone?" she asked softly. Elijah looked at her. The girl who had once been dying under juniper now stood tall, proud, alive. "Don't reckon I am anymore," he said. And as the wind rolled across the plains, carrying the smoke of cooking fires and the distant rhythm of drums, Elijah Cutter, loner and warrior, scarred and silent, realized something he never expected. The world hadn't left him behind. It had just waited for him to choose his place in it.